Your life doesn't fall apart because you failed. It falls apart because you refuse to let go of what's quietly destroying you. There was a time in my life when I thought success meant adding more. More people, more projects, more goals, more noise. I kept saying yes to everything and everyone, afraid that saying no would make me lose opportunities. But all it did was make me lose myself. I remember sitting in my car one night, exhausted and empty, staring at the city lights, realizing that the weight I was carrying wasn't from the world, but from the things I was too afraid to eliminate. That's when I learned growth isn't about accumulation. It's about subtraction. The peace you seek is not in what you gain, but in what you're willing to release. So, let's talk about the 10 things you must quietly eliminate from your life if you truly want to rise, rebuild, and reclaim your power. Number 1, eliminate the need to be liked. There comes a moment in everyone's life when they realize that the endless chase for approval is the quietest form of self-abandonment. You bend, you adjust, you shrink yourself just to fit into spaces you were never meant to fit in, and for a nod, a smile, a validation that never lasts more than a few seconds before the emptiness returns. I remember meeting a man years ago, let's call him Daniel, a brilliant artist who had every reason to shine, but spent most of his life dimming his light just to make others comfortable. He grew up believing that love had to be earned through performance, that his worth depended on applause. In his 20s, he was the guy who said yes to every request, who laughed when he wanted to cry, who agreed when his heart screamed no. People admired him, but nobody truly saw him. One evening, after another long day of pretending, he sat alone in his small studio staring at a half-finished painting. The colors were dull, lifeless, just like he felt. He told me, I realized that I'd become a collection of other people's expectation. I didn't even know what I liked anymore. That night, he did something radical. He turned off his phone, closed his social media, and started painting, not for others, but for himself. For the first time, he didn't care if anyone liked. He painted the truth, his anger, his heartbreak, his confusion. The next morning, he looked at the canvas and said, "This is me." It wasn't pretty. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That one decision to stop living for approval became the beginning of his freedom. You see, the need to be liked is a silent prison. It chains you to the illusion that other people's opinions define your value. You start editing yourself, choosing words carefully, not from authenticity, but from fear. Fear of being judged, rejected, misunderstood. But the irony is that in trying to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one, not even yourself. The truth is, you could be the most generous, kind, pure-hearted soul, and someone will still find a reason not to like you. So why keep giving your peace away to people who haven't earned access to it? Life begins to change the moment you stop performing and start being. The moment you stop seeking approval, you start commanding respect. When you stop explaining, people start noticing. The quiet confidence that comes from self-acceptance is magnetic. It doesn't beg for attention. It draws it naturally. And here's the deeper truth. You don't need everyone to like you. You only need to like yourself enough to walk away from those who don't. Daniel's story didn't end with that painting. He kept creating raw, imperfect, real. Over time, his art began to gain attention, not because he tried to please others, but because it carried something rare truth. He told me later, the moment I stopped painting for approval was the moment my work started touching souls. That's the paradox. When you stop chasing validation, you start attracting authenticity. People can feel when your energy is they can sense when your presence is grounded in truth, not performance. Every great transformation begins with a quiet decision to stop needing to be liked and to start living as who you really are. So look at your own life. Where are you still shrinking? Who are you still trying to imp? What conversations leave you feeling smaller instead of stronger? Be honest. It's time to step out of that illusion. Not everyone will understand your silence, your boundaries, your evolution, and that's okay. You are not meant to be understood by everyone. You are meant to be aligned with the right ones. Let your life be a reflection of truth, not a reaction to opinion, because when you stop needing to be liked, you finally become free. Free to speak your truth, free to walk your path, free to shine without apology, and that freedom, that unshakable sense of inner peace is worth more than all the approval in the world. Number 2, eliminate constant comparison. There is no faster way to destroy your peace than by comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. The world today is built to make you feel behind. Every scroll, every post, Every smile on the screen whispers, "You're not enough yet." But what if I told you that your timeline isn't late, that your rhythm isn't wrong, and that your path is sacred exactly as it is? I once knew a woman named Elena, a dancer who had devoted her life to movement. She wasn't famous, not on television or the big stage, but she had a passion that burned quietly inside her. Yet every day she'd open her phone and see others, dancers younger than her, with millions of followers, glamorous stages, applause she never received. Slowly that passion began to dare. She started questioning her worth, wondering if her dreams had expired. One evening, I found her sitting alone in the corner of a rehearsal room, staring at the mirror with tears in her eyes. She whispered, "I used to dance because it made me feel alive. Now I dance because I'm trying to prove I still belong." That broke my heart because I saw myself in her. I saw how comparison can turn something sacred into something suffocating. That night, Elena decided to do something simple yet powerful. She deleted every social app on her phone for 30 days. No scrolling, no comparing, no distractions. Instead, she returned to the reason she started dancing in the first place: to connect, to feel, to express. She began to dance in empty rooms again, barefoot, eyes closed, feeling the music, not the pressure. One evening after practice, she told me, "I finally remembered what it feels like to move without needing to be seen." That one sentence held the entire truth. The most beautiful lives are not lived for display, they're lived for depth. When the month ended, she returned to her social platforms, but something inside her had shifted. She no longer cared about followers or applause. She began sharing her art again. But this time, it wasn't performance, it was truth. And strangely enough, that authenticity drew more people to her than she could have ever chased through comparison. You see, comparison blinds you to your own blessing. It makes you measure your chapter 1 against someone else's chapter 20. It convinces you that you're behind when in reality you're exactly where you're meant to be. Life isn't a race, it's an unfold. Everyone's path has a different rhythm. And when you keep looking sideways, you lose sight of your own horizon. The flower doesn't envy the tree. The moon doesn't compete with the sun. They both shine when it's their time. In the same way, your purpose cannot bloom under the shadow of comparison. You can't hear your calling if you're busy echoing someone else's. Elena's story became a mirror for me too. I began noticing how much of my own energy was wasted trying to keep up with people who weren't even aware I exist. I realized that comparison doesn't just make you jealous. It makes you forget who you are. It tricks you into believing that your worth must be proven instead of felt. The truth is you will never be satisfied by becoming more like others, only by becoming more like yourself. Your story has its own timing, its own beauty. And when you start embracing that, everything changes. You stop competing and start creating. You stop rushing and start rising. So if you're caught in the web of comparison, pause, breathe, look at your own path with gratitude. There's no one else on earth with your exact combination of scars, lessons, and dreams. That uniqueness is your superpower. The only person you should ever compare yourself to is the one you were yesterday. Every small step forward, every moment of growth, every battle you quietly fight, that's progress. And that progress is sacred. When you eliminate comparison, you reclaim your energy. You start showing up from wholeness instead of insecurity. You begin to understand that the universe didn't make you to compete. It made you to contribute. Remember this. Envy will drain you, but gratitude will raise you. Comparison keeps you trapped in imitation. Purpose sets you free in creation. The moment you stop looking at what others have, you begin to notice how much you already hold within you. And that's when life starts to shift. Not because you have more, but because you finally see the value in what you already are. Number 3, eliminate negative self-talk. There is a voice that lives inside every one of us. A voice that can either build us or break us. Most people don't realize how much of their suffering isn't caused by the world, but by the words they whisper to themselves in silence. The mind can become a battlefield, and for many the war is internal. I remember a man named Michael, a once promising athlete whose life took a sharp turn after a devastating knee injury ended his career. Overnight, he went from being celebrated to being forgotten. The cheering crowds disappeared, the phone stopped ringing, and the identity he had built his entire life around was suddenly gone. In the months that followed, he fell into deep self-blame. Every morning he'd stare at his reflection and hear that same voice say, "You're worthless now. You're finished. You'll never matter again." It wasn't the injury that broke him. It was those words, "The human spirit can endure almost anything, but it cannot thrive under constant self-attack." He told me once I realized I was living with a bully, and that bully was me. Those words have stayed with me ever since because they are the truth most people are afraid to admit. One evening when he had hit his lowest point, Michael did something simple but life-changing. He sat down with a notebook and began writing down everything that voice told him. Every insult, every judgment, every cruel phrase that echoed in his mind. When he read them aloud, he started crying. "I would never talk to another human being this way," he said. "So why do I talk to myself like this?" That question cracked something open inside him. For the first time, he realized that his inner voice wasn't the truth. It was a pet, a habit of self-sabotage formed over years of attaching his worth to performance. So he made a decision. Every time the voice told him he couldn't, he would respond with something different. Not toxic positivity, but truth. When it said, "You're done," he answered, "No, I'm still here." When it said, "You're not enough," he whispered, "I'm trying, and that's enough for today." Day by day, that war inside him began to quiet down. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly, the voice that once criticized him began to sound like one that cared for him. That shift changed everything. The words you speak to yourself create the atmosphere you live in. If your inner dialogue is filled with judgment, fear, and doubt, you'll always feel unsafe, even in moments of success. But when you begin to nurture yourself with compassion, you build a home within your own heart, and that home becomes your foundation, a place no one can take away. So many people are waiting for someone else to encourage them, to believe in them, to validate their worth. But what if you became that person for yourself? What if you decided that from this moment on, you would speak to yourself the way you would to a dear friend who's trying their best? You'd be amazed how quickly your energy would shift, how much lighter you'd feel, how many doors would begin to open simply because you're no longer fighting against your own reflection. I've seen it time and again. People who seem broken on the outside aren't destroyed by their circumstances. They're crushed by their inner critic. The most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. "I'll never make it. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not talented." And those sentences become invisible walls that keep us small. But the truth is, you were never meant to live in that prison. You were meant to rise above it. Every thought is a seed. And if you keep planting self-doubt, you'll keep harvesting limitation. But if you start planting self-belief, even small hesitant seeds of kindness, something beautiful begins to grow. Michael eventually became a coach, not for athletes, but for people struggling with identity loss, those who had forgotten how to see their worth beyond achievement. He told me, "I learned that I didn't lose my purpose when I lost my career. I lost it when I stopped believing I was enough." That sentence is the essence of everything. Belief is the foundation of all transformation. When you eliminate negative self-talk, you don't just change your thoughts. You change the way you show up in the world. You stop waiting for permission to live fully. You stop apologizing for your existence. You start walking with quiet confidence, knowing that your worth isn't conditioned. So if you're listening to this and you've been hard on yourself, I want you to pause and ask, whose voice is that? Is it truly yours? Or is it an echo of something you were told long ago? Because you are not your failures, not your flaws, not your fear. You are the one who survived all of them. Speak to yourself with love. Encourage yourself the way the world never did. And one day you'll wake up realizing that the voice that once tore you down now lifts you up because you decided to heal. That is the quiet power of self-compassion. The moment when you finally stop being your own enemy and start becoming your greatest ally. Number 4, eliminate energy-draining people. There comes a season in life when you must learn that peace is not a gift others hand you. It's a boundary you build for yourself. The older I grow, the clearer I see that not everyone around you is meant to walk with you to your next level. Some people exist only to teach you the difference between connection and attachment, between love and dependency, between being understood and being used. I once knew a man named Jonathan, kind, generous, always the one to show up when others needed something. If you called at 200 a.m., he'd answer. If you were in crisis, he'd drop everything to be there. Everyone loved him, but few truly loved for him. I remember visiting him one evening. His living room was filled with people laughing, eating, talking. Yet he looked empty, distant. When the last guest left, he sat down and said quietly, "I'm surrounded by people, But I've never felt more alone. He had spent years being the helper, the healer, the one who gave without asking. And in return, he was left drained, invisible, and quietly breaking. The realization hit him like a storm. Sometimes you don't lose energy because of what you're doing. You lose it because of who you're doing it for. A few weeks later, Jonathan did something that most people never find the courage to do. He stopped showing up for everyone else and started showing up for himself. He began to step back from the constant noise, the endless phone calls, the draining circles that only came alive when he was giving. He told me that at first he felt guilty. Guilty for saying no, guilty for choosing rest, guilty for no longer being everyone's emotional oxygen. But slowly that guilt transformed into clarity. He realized that the right people don't get offended by your boundaries. They respect them. The wrong ones only love the version of you that served them. The more distance he created, the clearer he could see who truly cared. His silence became a filter. Those who loved his energy but never gave it back quietly disappeared. And though it hurt at first, it made space for something sacred, peace. You see, not every connection deserves access to your spirit. Some people are lessons, not lifetime. They come with heavy hands and empty hearts, leaving you drained while calling it love. And sometimes they don't even mean harm. They're just carrying their own pain and unconsciously feeding on your light because they've forgotten how to make their own. But you must understand this truth. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. You cannot keep pouring from an empty soul and expect to feel whole. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It is a form of self-respect. It's saying, I refuse to let my kindness become a weapon against me. The world may label it cold, distant, or prideful, but those who truly love you will understand that your peace is sacred. I remember the turning point for Jonathan. One night his phone rang again. Another friend who only called when they needed some. But this time, instead of rushing to fix it, he took a deep breath, turned off his phone, and went for a walk under the quiet city lights. He said it felt strange, even rebellious, but liberate. For the first time in years, he told me, I realized that my peace mattered more than their approval. That one decision started changing everything. Within months, he had fewer people in his life, but his days were lighter, his laughter was genuine, and his mind was the emptiness he once feared turned out to be space. Space for healing, creativity, and genuine connection. And that's the thing, when you eliminate energy-draining people, you don't end up lonely. You start attracting those who love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. You begin to hear your own thoughts again, feel your own emotions, and see your own worth without distortion. You start understanding that you are not obligated to carry everyone, that some people are meant to walk beside you, not on top of you. The truth is you cannot rise while carrying what's breaking you. You cannot heal in environments that constantly reopen your W. So take a moment and ask yourself who in your life leaves you feeling lighter, and who leaves you feeling exhausted, who claps for you genuinely, and who claps only when they need something from you. The answers might hurt, but they will set you free. Learn to love from a distance, to help without losing yourself, to care without collapsing, because peace is expensive, and not everyone can afford to go where you're going. The higher you rise, the quieter your circle becomes. Not because you've become better than others, but because you finally realize that your energy is a sacred currency, and you will never again spend it on those who only drain your soul. Number 5, eliminate the fear of being alone. There is a silence that most people are afraid to meet, the silence of their own company. The fear of being alone has become one of the most crippling prisons in modern life. We fill every quiet space with noise, every pause with distraction, every emotion with someone else's presence, just to avoid the echo of our own thoughts. But here's the truth. You will never know yourself until you are willing to be alone with yourself. I remember a woman named Sarah, brilliant, kind, and full of life, yet she had one deep fear: solitude. She had spent her entire adult life jumping from relationship to relationship, friendship to friendship, constantly surrounding herself with people because the idea of being alone terrified her. One evening after another painful breakup, she told me with tears in her eyes, I don't know who I am without someone to love. That sentence struck me hard because it's a feeling so many carry silently. We chase connection not always because we crave love, but because we're afraid of the emptiness that comes when we stop being needed. After that breakup, Sarah made a choice that changed everything. She decided to spend 1 year completely alone. No dating, no distractions, no running, just her. At first it was unbearable. She described the first few weeks as withdrawal. Her hands itched to text someone, her mind raced with old memories, and her evenings felt endless. The silence screamed at her, forcing her to face everything she had buried beneath the noise, her insecurities, her childhood wounds, her unhealed heartbreaks. But slowly something began to shift. She started waking up early and sitting by the window with her coffee, just watching the sunrise in stillness. She began journaling, not to document her pain, but to listen to it. She started walking for hours, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, sometimes feeling nothing at all. And in those quiet walks, she began meeting herself, the version of her that had always been waiting underneath the noise. It felt like I was meeting an old friend I'd forgotten, she told me. Months passed and her solitude turned into strength. She discovered passions she never had time for, painting, reading, cooking. She realized that she wasn't lonely. She was just disconnected from herself. She stopped chasing people who couldn't meet her energy because she finally learned to give herself what she was always begging others for: attention, love, and peace. The woman who once said, "I can't be alone now, I've never felt more complete." And that transformation taught me something profound. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of self-connection. When you start enjoying your own company, you stop fearing solitude, and that's when life becomes sick. The truth is, most people never find out how powerful they truly are because they never spend enough time alone to hear their own voice. They mistake noise for meaning and attention for affection, but it's in solitude where you meet your clarity, your intuition, your authentic. The greatest ideas, the deepest healing, and the most profound peace are born in the quiet spaces no one else can enter. When you eliminate the fear of being alone, you stop settling for company that drains you just to escape silence. You stop mistaking attachment for love. You start realizing that solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's the ground where you build yourself before you share yourself. I remember visiting Sarah a year after her decision. Her apartment was quiet, full of sunlight, plants and art, reflections of a woman who had finally built a home within herself. She smiled and said, "I used to look for peace in people. Now I create it." That one sentence holds the key to freedom. The moment you no longer depend on others for your sense of worth, you become untouchable. The opinions, rejections, and absences that once shattered you now roll off your back like rain. You no longer chase validation because you found it within. You no longer fear being left because you've learned to stay. So if you find yourself afraid of solitude, I want you to understand something: that fear isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you've spent too long running from yourself, but you can stop running today. Turn off the noise. Sit with your thoughts. Listen to your heart. You'll be surprised to find that the silence you once feared is not empty. It's full of answers. Alone is not lonely. It's alignment. It's peace. It's true. It's the sacred space where your soul whispers, "You were never incomplete. You just forgot to come home." And when you finally eliminate the fear of being alone, you don't just find yourself, you find freedom. And that freedom is the foundation of every great transformation that will follow. Number 6, eliminate the habit of overthinking. There are battles that happen only inside the mind, wars no one sees, yet they drain more energy than anything else. Overthinking is one of those silent wars. It is the art of creating pain before anything even happens. The habit of turning possibilities into problems and the ability to drown in imaginary storms when the sky above you is still clear. I once met a man named Aaron, a software engineer with an incredible mind but a restless heart. He could never sleep easily because his thoughts never stopped moving. Every decision, small or big, became a marathon in his mind. If a message was left unread, he assumed he had done something wrong. If his manager gave him feedback, he replayed the conversation for hours. Analyzing every word, he would plan doubt, then overplan, then start again. He told me one day, "It's like living with 100 tabs open in my brain all the time." Despite his success, he was exhausted not from what he did, but from what he thought about doing. The breaking point came during a project presentation. Aaron had spent weeks preparing, rehearsing every line, imagining every possible question. Yet, when he finally stood before his team, his voice cracked, his mind froze, and his confidence vanished. Afterward, he sat alone in his car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, whispering, "I did everything right, so why do I feel so wrong?" That day, he realized the truth. He hadn't failed because he wasn't ready. He failed because he was overprepared to the point of paralysis. Overthinking doesn't protect you from mistakes. It magnifies your fears until you stop living altogether. It tricks you into believing that control brings safety when in reality it steals peace. A few weeks later, Oran began seeing a mentor, an older man known for his simplicity and wisdom. During their first conversation, the mentor asked him to sit quietly for 5 minutes without thinking about anything, just breathing, being. Aaron laughed and said that's impossible, but he tried. Within seconds his mind was racing again. Work, deadlines, old regrets, imagined future. The mentor smiled and said, that's your problem. You think clarity comes from thinking more. But sometimes the mind becomes clear only when you stop forcing it. Those words changed him. From that day on, Aaron started practicing stillness. Short moments of silence before making decisions. Moments of breathing before responding. Moments of presence before reacting. It wasn't easy. His thoughts still came like waves. But instead of drowning, he began to observe them. He learned that thoughts are like clouds. They pass when you stop chasing them. Over time, he discovered something profound. Most of what he worried about never happened. The future he feared was mostly fiction written by anxiety and edited by memory. He realized that overthinking is not a sign of intelligence, but of fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being hurt. But life cannot be lived through analysis alone. It demands trust. Trust in timing, trust in intuition. Trust that even if things fall apart, you'll find a way to rebuild. The more Aaron trusted, the lighter he became. He began to sleep through the night. He started making decisions not from fear, but from clarity. His performance at work improved, but more importantly, his peace returned with her. I once asked him what changed most about him after letting go of overthinking. He said, I stopped trying to predict every outcome and started allowing life to surprise me again. That sentence carries a truth we all need to remember. When you stop overthinking, you don't lose control, you regain it. You reclaim the energy you wasted on worrying and use it to live. You start realizing that the answers you've been chasing were never outside you. They were always waiting beneath the noise. The mind will always try to solve problems that don't exist. It's what it's designed to do. But peace begins when you recognize that not every thought deserves attention. Not every question needs an answer. Not every fear deserves belief. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your future is to stop trying to figure it all out and simply take the next step with faith. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking harder, it comes from trusting deeper. So if your mind is racing, slow down, breathe, remind yourself that not everything needs to be understood right now. Life unfolds one moment at a time, and no amount of worry will speed it up. The habit of overthinking is the habit of not trusting yourself, the process, or the universe. Let it go, be here. The moment you stop trying to control every possibility, you open yourself to something far greater, and in that peace you'll find something priceless. The quiet confidence that no matter what happens, you will handle it. You will adapt, and you will rise because you finally learned to think less and live more. Number 7, eliminate toxic habits that numb you. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't make you cry, it makes you stop feeling altogether. That's what toxic habits do. They numb you, not heal you. They're the quiet addictions we use to escape the noise inside us. I once knew a woman named Rachel who seemed to have it all. A promising career, a vibrant social life, and an endless stream of smiles for everyone she met. But behind those smiles lived silence. A silence filled with loneliness, exhaustion, and emotional pain she never allowed anyone to see. After a difficult breakup and years of pressure at work, she found herself reaching for little escapes. Scrolling for hours, drinking a little too much, binge watching shows to silence the thoughts that screamed when the world got quiet. It's just how I unwind, she told herself. But what began as comfort slowly became her cage. The things she did to avoid her pain became the things that kept her in it. One night, after another long binge of mindless distractions, Rachel sat in the dark with her phone in her hand, staring at her reflection in the black screen. She didn't recognize the person looking back. There was a dullness in her eyes, not sadness, but emptiness. She realized she hadn't truly felt anything in months. No joy, no excitement, no curiosity, just the flat, numb rhythm of survival. That moment hit her like a quiet truth. She had become addicted not to pleasure, but to avoidance. Every drink, every distraction, every hour spent scrolling was her way of saying, I don't want to face myself today. But the more she ran from her pain, the bigger it grew in the shadow. That's when she began to understand healing isn't about escaping discomfort. It's about facing it without needing to hide behind something. Rachel started small. She deleted the social media apps that stole her time and attention. The first few days were difficult. Silence felt uncomfortable, almost unbearable. She didn't know how to be alone with her thoughts anymore. But as days turned into weeks, she began to reconnect with parts of herself she had forgotten. She started journaling, not perfectly, just honestly. She began walking every morning without headphones, letting herself hear the rhythm of her own breath. The noise in her mind began to soften and emotions she had buried, grief, guilt, disappointment started to surface. It hurt deeply, but it was for the first time in a long time. She wasn't numb, she was alive. The truth is toxic habits don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they look like business, like endless entertainment, like I'm fine. But anything that disconnects you from your emotions, from the truth of who you are, is quietly destroying you. You can't numb the pain without numbing the joy. You can't hide from sadness without also hiding from purpose. The more you avoid your emotions, the more power they gain over you. And the longer you stay numb, the harder it becomes to remember what feeling alive even means. I remember Rachel telling me months later, facing my pain was terrifying. But staying numb was because when you're numb, you don't just lose pain, you lose yourself. That statement stayed with me. The world today glorifies distraction. Quick dopamine, instant comfort, the next escape. But the real PM and emotions felt become strength. The things that numb you also rob you of time, of energy, of clarity. The moment you decide to let them go, you begin to hear your own soul again. To eliminate toxic habits, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. Notice what you run to when life hurts. Ask yourself, what am I trying not to feel? That question alone can change everything. The goal is not to replace every bad habit with a good one. It's to create space for awareness, to choose consciousness over comfort, because transformation doesn't happen in escape. It happens in honesty. Rachel eventually found her way back to herself. She built new rhythms, reading, exercising, painting, meditating, not to fill the silence, but to grow within it. Her smile returned, not the performance one, but the kind that comes from peace. She told me, it's strange. I used to chase happiness. Now I just protect my peace. That's what healing does. It turns noise into clarity, pain into purpose, and distractions into discipline. So if you find yourself numbing out through overwork, screens, substances, or constant busyness, pause, sit with yourself, feel what you've been avoiding. It may sting at first, but that's the sting of life coming back into your soul. Remember this, you cannot build a new life on old escapes. Let them go quietly but completely, because every moment you spend numbing your pain is a moment stolen from your power. Eliminate the habits that dull your spirit, and you'll begin to taste the raw, beautiful liveness that has been waiting underneath the numbness all along. Number 8, eliminate the negative self-talk. There is no voice more powerful in shaping your destiny than the one that speaks inside your own mind. The tone of that inner voice determines whether you rise or remain small, whether you walk with confidence or crawl through doubt. Negative self-talk is the invisible prison that keeps countless people trapped in a life they no longer want but still believe they deserve. I remember a young man named Elijah, a talented musician whose voice could move souls, yet he never sang outside the walls of his apartment. Every time someone encouraged him to perform publicly, his mind whispered, "You're not good enough. People will laugh. You'll fail." Those words weren't coming from anyone else. They were echoes from his own self-image, distorted over years of comparison, rejection, and fear. He grew up in a home where love was conditional. Praise came only when perfection did. So he learned to measure his worth by how flawlessly he could perform. And when he couldn't meet those impossible standards, his inner critic became louder, crueler, relentless. For years, Elijah lived with that voice as if it were the truth. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see the potential everyone else saw. He saw the mistakes, the flaws, the past failures replaying on a loop. His days were a silent battle between his dreams and his doubt. He tried affirmations, but they felt like lies. He tried ignoring the voice, but silence only made it louder. The breakthrough came one evening when he attended a small gathering at a local cafe. A friend, Dee, convinced him to share a song, just one. He reluctantly agreed. As he walked onto the small wooden stage, his hands shook, his heartbeat drowned out every sound. But then he saw an older man sitting in the corner, nodding softly, eyes kind as if saying, "It's okay, sing anyway." Elijah closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and his voice cracked at first, but something strange happened. No one laughed. They listened. They felt by the time he finished, tears filled his eyes. For the first time in years, he heard something louder than his fear applause, real human honest applause. Afterward, that older man came up to him and said something Elijah never forgot. "You've spent so long believing lies about yourself that you've forgotten how to hear your truth. Don't let the voice of fear be the narrator of your story." That sentence changed everything. Elijah began to understand that the voice in his head wasn't him, it was a recording. Old pain, past criticism, and inherited self-doubt playing on repeat. It had no authority unless he gave it power. So he started challenging. Whenever the voice whispered, "You're not enough," he responded, "Maybe I was told that once, but it's not true anymore." When it said, "You'll fail," he'd say, "I might, but I'll learn." Slowly, that inner dialogue shifted from cruelty to compassion. The transformation wasn't overnight. There were days he slipped back into self-criticism, but this time he noticed awareness became his weapon. He began to write down the harsh words he told himself daily, phrases like, "I'm not smart enough, I always ruin things. No one cares." When he saw them on paper, they looked absurd. He realized he would never speak that way to a friend. So why was he speaking that way to himself? That realization became the beginning of healing. The truth number 9, eliminate the fear of starting over. Starting over, those two words have the power to terrify and liberate you at the same time. Because to start over means admitting that something has ended, that something you once poured your heart into no longer serves you, and that the version of yourself who built it must now let it go. But there's a hidden truth in every ending. Sometimes life isn't falling apart. It's clearing space for something new. I remember a man named Daniel, a successful architect in his mid-40s, who once had everything society tells us to strive for: the dream job, the house, the family, the admiration. But when the economy crashed, so did his world. Within months, he lost his business. His marriage fell apart under the pressure, and his confidence, the identity he had built over 2 decades, shattered like glass. He told me once, when everything you thought you were disappears, you don't just lose your life, you lose your sense of who you are. For a year, Daniel drifted, living off savings, avoiding old friends, numbing his days with television, and quietly drowning in shame. He was alive, but not living. The fear of starting again paralyzed him. He kept telling himself it was too late, that he was too old, that the best chapters were already behind him. Then one morning, as he sat at a coffee shop, flipping through old designs on his tablet, a young barista noticed his sketches and asked, "Did you draw these?" He nodded quietly. She smiled and said, "They're beautiful. You should teach this stuff. There are so many people who'd love to learn." That simple moment pierced through his despair like sunlight through clouds. He realized he had been so focused on what he lost that he never asked what he still had: his gift, his knowledge, his passion. That day, Daniel decided to try again, not to rebuild his old life, but to begin a new one. He started teaching architecture basics online using his living room as a studio. The first class had only 6 students, but those 6 shared his lessons, and slowly his courses grew. Within 2 years, he built a thriving online academy, mentoring young designers across the world. He told me later, "Losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to remember who I was without the title." Daniel's story is a reflection of a universal truth. The fear of starting over often comes from believing that what's behind you was the best you'll ever have. But that belief is a lie. What's behind you is only preparation for what's next. The comfort of the familiar is seductive, even when it's killing your growth. Sometimes the hardest part of moving forward isn't the new path, it's releasing the identity that no longer fit. We stay in jobs we've outgrown, in relationships that no longer align, in versions of ourselves that feel safe but small. Because starting over feels like failure, but it's not. It's evolution. Starting over is not a punishment, it's a privilege. It means life still believes there's more for you. When you think about it, every sunrise is proof that you can begin again. The world resets every 24 hours, yet we humans cling to our yesterdays, as if letting go will erase our worth. The truth is, beginnings often wear the disguise of ending. That breakup, that job loss, that rejection, they are not walls, they are doorways. Every new chapter demands a quieter kind of courage. the courage to believe that your story isn't finished, that even though you've fallen, you can still rise stronger, wiser, freer. And this courage doesn't come all at once. It's built moment by moment, decision by decision. In those quiet hours when no one is watching, when the doubt is loud and you whisper to yourself, I will try again. I once asked Daniel what he would tell someone afraid to start over. He eyed and said, you won't recognize it at first, but losing something isn't the end. It's the invitation. The real question isn't why did this happen, but what is this trying to teach me? That's what it means to start over, to turn pain into purpose, endings into opening. Because life has a way of removing what no longer aligns with your becoming. It doesn't ask for your permission. It just clears the path. And though it feels cruel at first, one day you'll look back and realize it was grace in disguise. The fear of starting over fades when you understand this. You've already survived your worst days. The storm that broke you didn't end you. It revealed your strength. You've rebuilt before, maybe in ways no one saw emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You already know how to, so don't fear beginning again. Fear staying stuck in a life that no longer fits who you're meant to be. Remember, your worth was never tied to what you built. It's tied to who you became while building it. So, if life has stripped you of something, a dream, a title, a relationship, don't see it as the end. See it as a sacred reset. Don't chase the old version of you. Honor her. Thank her, then let her go because she got you here, but she can't take you further. And maybe, just maybe, what you thought was a breakdown is actually a breakthrough. The life you're afraid to rebuild might just be the one that sets you free. Number 10, eliminate comparison and focus on our own journey. Comparison is the thief of peace, the silent poison that convinces you you're behind, unworthy, or not enough. It's subtle and seductive, whispering through every scroll, every conversation, every success story that isn't yours. And in that quiet whisper, it steals your joy. I remember a man named Leo, a talented photographer who used to capture life with a rare sensitivity, the kind of beauty most people overlook. He started his career humbly with an old secondhand camera and a heart full of dream. For years, he photographed small weddings, community events, sunsets by the lake. Nothing glamorous, but each frame carried emotion, honesty, and soul. People loved his work. But everything began to change when he started spending more time online, following other photographers, influencers with massive followings, expensive gear, exotic shoots, and awards. At first, he told himself he was seeking inspiration, but slowly that inspiration turned into self-doubt. Each post he saw became a mirror reflecting what he lacked. They're better, he thought. I'll never reach that level. The more he compared, the smaller he felt. And in trying to match the world's standards, he lost his own rhythm. One evening, after yet another day of scrolling and self-criticism, Leo sat in his studio staring at his camera. He hadn't taken a picture in weeks. His passion, once alive and curious, now felt heavy and forced. That's when his mentor, an old photographer named Marcus, visited. Marcus looked at Leo's dusty camera and said softly, "When did you stop seeing beauty through your own eyes?" Leo didn't understand. Marcus continued, "You used to shoot because it made you feel something, not because it made others approve. Somewhere along the way, you stopped chasing light and started chasing likes." Those words cut deep. That night, Leo went for a walk without his phone, carrying only his old camera. He wandered aimlessly until he reached the same lake he once loved to photograph. The sun was setting, painting the water in gold and crimson. He raised his camera, hesitated for a moment, and then took a shot. No filters, no audience, no validation, just him, the light and the truth. In that moment, something inside him awakened again. It wasn't his talent that had disappeared. It was his perspective. Over the next months, Leo unfollowed dozens of accounts, stopped comparing, and began photographing life as he saw it, ordinary, imperfect, human. His pictures became raw, deeper, and ironically, when he stopped trying to impress, his work began to inspire more people than ever before. He told me later, "The moment I stopped competing with others, I started creating from truth." That's the paradox of comparison. When you chase someone else's path, you lose your own power. When you compete with their pace, you forget your purpose. Everyone's journey unfolds differently. Some bloom early, some late, some rise quietly, some loudly. But time doesn't reward the fastest. It rewards the most faithful. Comparison doesn't just steal joy. It blinds you to how far you've already come. You start measuring your worth by someone else's highlight reel, forgetting that every masterpiece is painted in private through struggle, failure, and what you see in others is often the result of chapters you haven't lived yet. And what they don't show, their doubts, their pain, their loneliness is the same weight you carry too. The truth is, no one is ahead or behind. We're all walking at the pace of our purpose. The only real competition is between who you were yesterday and who you're becoming today. I once asked Leo what his biggest lesson was from that season. He smiled and said, "You can't compare your roots to someone else's bloom. Growth happens underground." For those words have stayed with me. Life isn't a race. It's a rhythm. And that rhythm is different for everyone. Some chapters take longer because they're building a foundation that can't be rushed. When you stop comparing, you stop doubting your time. You begin to trust that what's meant for you won't miss you. And what's not meant for you, you won't stay no matter how much you chase it. So if you find yourself constantly comparing to friends, colleagues, star angers online, pause. Look at your journey. Look at how far you've come from who you once were. The nig-ats you cried but still showed up. The failures that taught you resilience. The quiet efforts no one clapped for. That's progress. Not the kind that trends, but the kind that trans. Remember, what makes your path powerful is that it's yours. No one else can live your lessons, carry your scars, or fulfill your calling. Eliminating comparison doesn't mean you stop learning from others. It means you stop letting their path define your worth. You learn to celebrate their success without questioning your own. You realize that your story doesn't need to look like theirs to be beautiful. The world doesn't need another version of them. It needs the truest version of you. The one who creates, speaks, wields, and lives from authenticity, not competition. So stop comparing and start living. Stop chasing someone else's finish line and start honoring your own beginning. Because peace begins where comparison ends. And when you finally silence the noise of everyone else's journey, you'll hear something extraordinary. Your own voice, your own pace, your own power. That's when life stops being a race and becomes what it was always meant to be, a masterpiece unfolding at its own divine time. In the end, life isn't about how much you accumulate. It's about how much you're brave enough to release. The truth is, you don't rise by adding more. You rise by letting go of what keeps you small. Every habit, every fear, every attachment you quietly eliminate becomes a doorway to freedom. You don't need to announce your transformation to anyone. Your peace will speak louder than your words ever could. Because the most powerful shifts happen in silence. They happen when you finally stop chasing validation, stop clinging to what hurts, stop replaying old stories and decide once and for all that your peace matters more than your past. Maybe no one sees how hard you've been fighting. Maybe they don't understand the silent battles you faced, the nights you stayed awake wondering if things will ever change. But I promise you, the very pain that tried to break you is shaping the strength that will carry you. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are simply being refined. Everything you've lost was never meant to stay, and everything meant for you is already making its way toward you. You just have to make space emotionally, mentally, spiritually for it to arrive. So start today quietly without fanfare. Eliminate the noise, eliminate the fear, eliminate the need to be understood by everyone. Eliminate the habits that numb your soul and the comparisons that dim your light. Because the moment you start releasing what drains you, you begin attracting what aligns with you. The universe has a way of rewarding the brave, those who are willing to walk away from comfort to meet their calling. When you look back one day, you'll realize that every ending, every heartbreak, every loss was simply redirecting you toward your truth. You'll understand that letting go was never about losing. It was about coming home to yourself. And when that happens, when you finally stand in your own peace, unbothered, grounded, and free, that's when life starts to unfold in ways you never imagined. So rise quietly but powerfully. Let go of what no longer belongs. Rebuild from peace, not pressure. Because when you stop being available to everything that drains your spirit, you become available to everything that was always meant for your soul. This is your time to rise, rebuild, and reclaim your power, not loudly, not desperately, but silently with dignity, grace, and unshakable strength.